Well, hello there, everyone. This is Cleve Gaddis coming to you from Atlanta, Georgia. And I am so excited to be with you today. We'll take a few minutes and let everybody get out of the waiting room and into the webinar. And we will start talking about the real talk, the talk that helps us all get our listings sold. Looks like we've got a really big crowd on today's webinar, and I'm so excited for that. It takes a minute for everybody to get in, so we'll wait just a few more seconds and then everybody will be in and we'll go ahead and get started. We're doing this in a real webinar format, which means if you want to interact with me, then you'll need to do it through the chat. It's very simple. All of you know where that is. I will do my best to answer as many questions as I possibly can from participants, and April and Taylor are going to help me with that. So April and Taylor, if you need to interrupt and let me know, hey, you've got some questions that really need to be answered, please make sure that you do that. I'm going to stop my share for just a second. And as we get started, I want to mention just some questions that I have received or some comments that I've received from people all over the country. And I have to, if you don't mind me being honest with you and transparent with you, I am very rarely nervous. Sometimes I have a little anxiety before a presentation, but I'm very rarely nervous. You know, the kind of nervous that you know your stomach hurts before you do something. And for the last 2 days, I have felt a significant amount of weight about this particular webinar. And I'm not exactly sure why, but I think the reason is because this is such a significant deal. So there are households all across the United States and Canada whose incomes are suffering because agents are unable to get their listings to flow through the system and to sell. And so I've had people say these things to me. I've had people say, I'm doing everything I know how to, and it's still not moving the needle. And that feels heavy to me. I've had people say, I care more about selling the home than the sellers do. And that's not a fun place to be. I've had an agent say to me, every week I send updates, and every single week it feels like nothing changes. Nobody's listening. I'm the only one. Another agent said to me, I've poured hours and hours and hours into this listing, and I'm starting to resent it. And when the person said, I'm starting to resent it, I thought, wow, I know exactly how she feels because I have felt the exact same way about listings over the years. Had another agent say to me, they're ignoring all of my advice, but it's not selling, and they are blaming me. They're ignoring my advice. The property is not selling, and they're blaming me for it not selling. And I'll bet you that many of you are facing similar situations. Somebody said something to me that felt like the biggest weight I could possibly imagine. And they said, I used to love listing appointments. I used to love listing appointments. Now I feel sick to my stomach before each one. And I asked this person why, and she said it's because, or he said in this particular case, it's because I don't know what to do to get the sellers to do the things that they need to do in order to get their listing sold. Another agent said, I'm exhausted trying to get and convince people to do what they need to do. Another one said, I'm constantly walking on eggshells, trying to tell the truth without losing the listing. And one person said, hey, I'm just afraid to bring it up again. I don't want to do that. And then the last thing that really stuck with me the most, it just carried so much weight and so much significance. An agent said to me, I've started to question whether or not I'm even good at this anymore. And that reminds me of a conversation that I had with an agent several years ago after she had gone to a convention. And on the stage, they announced, hey, the agents who were successful in the past, those are not the same agents who are going to be successful in the future. And that was a very weighty comment for this particular agent who started thinking, I'm not sure that I have the ability to do what I need to do in order to be successful in today's world. And all of that weight is just, it feels so, so significant to me. I appreciate, by the way, I see some comments coming through. I'm so glad you're on from all over the place. But I'd like to just have all of you go to chat, and I'd like for you to just type in on a scale of 1 to 10. the level of problems you're having getting your listing sold. I know geographic areas, the Midwest, the market's working a little better. Northeast is working a little better. Southeast, Southwest, it's a little tougher. If you get down into Florida, it gets probably as tough as you can be on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 is, oh my gosh, it's terrible. And 1 is, you know what, everything's great. I got no problems. And so we've got some 10s and 5s and 8s, and we've got all kinds of numbers. It's just amazing. And guys, I just feel for you. I grew up, for those of you who know me, I grew up in the direct sales business. So I used to teach people to sell vacuum cleaner. So to say that I'm comfortable having conversations in difficult situations would be an understatement. I'm not as comfortable today as I was back then, because back then I was happy to knock on somebody's door and say, "Hey, by the way, how about you give me $1,000 for this vacuum cleaner?" But I want you to know that I think we have some solutions, and that part of our problem is the conversations that are being left out because we haven't had to have them in the future. And I think another problem, and forgive me, I've got a frog in my throat. Another one of our problems is we're not creating an understanding and an awareness of the market in our sellers before we list the homes. And so, as we talk through things today, and we're going to talk through many, many things, I'm going to key the presentation back up again so we can kind of start working through this. Let me pull it back up here. But as we talk through things today, if you have any questions, go to chat, put them in there. But this is all about having the talk that gets the listings sold. It's about resetting prices. I've had so many people around the country say to me, "Hey, it's not about resetting the prices. It's about resetting the prices and strategies. It's about setting them correctly in the first place." And I agree. So everything I'm going to tell you that you can do once you're into the listing and things start to go south, there are also things that you should be adding to the front end of your listing presentation. At the very end, I'm going to have some free resources for you. These are not resources that have ever been available anywhere else. They're only being offered now at this point to the people who are on this webinar today, and you'll get one opportunity to go through and get those at the end. I want to make sure, sometimes I go to webinars and I'm like, I don't even know if this person's talking to me. And so I want to make sure that you have a good idea of, hey, this session is for you if you have listings that aren't selling and you need a better way to reset expectations. If you want a repeatable conversation framework to confidently talk price and condition and strategy, and if you're ready to take responsibility for getting results even in a tougher market, because most of you, and I know so many of you, you know what to do to get a listing sold. You just can't get everybody on the same page as you are. And if you lead or coach other agents and you want to give them the tools that actually work, then this is for you. It's not for you if you're looking for a marketing gimmick and not a real strategy, because that's not what this is. This is some boring stuff we're going to talk about today. But there's probably nothing that you can talk to anybody about in the country if you're in real estate today that would give you more bang for the buck, that would give you more dollars to your family's income at the end of the year than learning how to make adjustments in terms of seller expectations. If you aren't willing to have those tough and honest conversations with your sellers, this is not for you. If you believe listings don't sell are always the seller's fault, I can't tell you how many times over the years that I have been so frustrated with my sellers because they just didn't get it and it was their fault it was not selling. The problem is they know way less about selling a home and buying a home than I do. And so once I finally got myself to the place where no matter what was happening, I accepted responsibility for what was happening, or I at least accepted my portion of the responsibility for what was happening, everything changed. And this session is not for you if you're not actively working with or pursuing listings right now. And people are saying, well, everybody does that. Well, there's some people who have decided to opt out of today's market. They are frustrated. They don't feel like they can deliver any value to anybody. And remember, the last agent comment that I gave you was, hey, I'm not even sure that I'm cut out for this anymore. And so what are the current situations with listings? And my question, and I'd love for you to go to chat. And I'd love for you to just put in, what is your current situation? What is frustrating you about the listing side of the business right now? And be something. Give me something very, very specific. And thank you, Dave, forehand. I'm glad that we're doing a refresher on this because you're right, we all need it. But go to chat and tell me what it is about your listings right now that's frustrating with you. Jamie says starting off strong and then goes dead with no showings. Frustrating. Sellers want a way high list price, trying to figure out how to price the home. Days on the market, no showings at all. Man, what a stinger that is. I suggest a price and they want wiggle room. These are all very, very real frustrations. Low ball offers, which Liana, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Low ball offers, they might not actually be as low ball as the sellers think they are. A multi generational home on 2 acres that's on day 42. And what's so interesting is I can remember a time, Rhonda, when if I had 42 days on the market for listings, say for example in 2011, I would have been the world record holder in Atlanta, Georgia, in terms of the least number of days on the market. So it's how things change. Buyers ask for something that you cannot change. That one went through really, really fast. Here, let me see. A bigger yard, more bedrooms. Oh, isn't that frustrating, Jerry? Somebody comes through and says, "Hey, my guys are looking for a 5 bedroom house, and yours is only a 4 bedroom house." And you just want to say to them, "Did you not see what the listing said? The listing says it only has X number of bedrooms, needs sellers motivated to take the next step, more competition in the area." Oh, this is cool. And Dave, I think you probably mean more competitive listings listed, and then the seller is not really aware of where their home fits into the mix. And you've just landed on something that is going to be a real prime topic on today's webinar, and that is how to make sure sellers understand how to accurately price their property. Love it. Read the listing info. That's so true. Sellers feel they're doing a fire sale when asked to lower the price. They're like, "Hey, um, I'm not going to give my house away." I love that Vicky's saying, "Hey, sellers are going to wait until the market favors them." And you know what? The reality is they might be waiting for years and years for the market to get back to the way it was in 2020 and 2021. Constant positive feedback, even about the price, buyers getting cold feet and don't write offers. And by the way, when you think about it, if I were a buyer in today's market, I might be worried about prices and values myself. Maybe I shouldn't, but I probably would be worried about that. So these are things that I can totally all understand. Let me jump back into the presentation again. And the next thing I want to talk about is what's the difference in a average agent and a good agent. An average agent lists a home and just hopes it works. They take the listing with very little pushback on price, condition, hoping it will sell as is. And for a while, it would work that way. They defend the seller's wishes, justify the pricing or the presentation choices in public and to other agents when they know it's off, meaning, "Hey, who knows, maybe we can get this price." When deep down in their hearts, they know, "Hey, this is not going to work, but I'm not prepared to have that conversation." They avoid the tough talk. When the listing sits, they send vague market updates. They reduce the amount of contact they have with people. They dread the conversations. And then in many cases, the ultimate end result is they lose the listing anyway. And more importantly, or more significantly, they lose the client's trust because eventually that listing will expire and the seller may fire the agent. Because when you think about it, and I know it's such a hard concept, but when you're the person listing the home and the seller doesn't know nearly as much about the market as you do, and you're the one responsible for marketing the home, who else is the seller supposed to blame? Even if it's not your fault, who else is the seller supposed to blame? And the reality is that I realized a long time ago that if I was trying to sell my own listing, which I don't do, I would have somebody else help me sell my properties. But I would blame myself. I would blame me if I was the agent and a home wasn't selling. So it makes sense when a seller wants to blame you. On the other hand, a professional agent, one who knows how to get results in any market. And I'll tell you, I have conversations with people all over the country, and I hear them say all the time, "It's not the price, the home is priced correctly." And I know that that agent actually believes what they're saying. But if a property is not selling, it is not possible for it to be priced correctly. Now, we'll get into some specifics on that a little bit later. And for anybody who says it's not the price, it's not the price, well, take any $500,000 house in the United States and drop the price to $250,000 today and see how long it takes you to get a contract. I'm not saying that price is a problem that we can always solve, because in many cases we cannot solve the price problem. But what I'm telling you is that price can always be the solution to issues with getting listings sold. So a professional agent starts with strategy. They guide the seller through a structured conversation about price and condition and market realities. And when the first couple times you do this and you start showing the seller, hey, there have been 14 homes listed in your neighborhood over the last 12 months. Only 7 of those have sold. So only 50% of the listings that have been listed in your neighborhood have actually sold, which means if we list it today, we only have a 50% chance of selling the home. Because when you think about it, if you communicate that to a seller, what you're saying to the seller is, my job is to put you in the 50% that sells, but more importantly, and listen to this because this is so significant, my job is to keep you out of the 50% that do not sell. This is very, very significant. Professional agents educate with confidence. They use visuals and they physically take their sellers and show them the other listings in the market. They cover market data. They talk about positioning tools to help sellers understand, not just hear the truth, but help them understand it. Tammy Slay, who is my fiance, some of you may know her, sent me a video today from John Deloney. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's the one who's one of the Dave Ramsey personalities. And he said something that was just so eye-opening to me. And it really made me think. He said, we speak in words, but people hear in pictures. And I said, let me let that think in. Let me let that sink in for just a second. We speak in words, but the people who hear us actually hear us in pictures, which means it is very possible for you to say something to a seller about what needs to be done in order to sell their listing, and for them to picture in their mind something very, very different than what you're saying because of prior experiences, because of what sold in their area, because they remember what the market was like in 2021, because they don't have any other options other than to sell it for a price that's too high because they need the money. And so just because we're using words to communicate with people does not mean they receive those words exactly the way we send them out, because they already have a picture in their mind. Agents who are professional revisit with a purpose, meaning they go back. When activity slows, they don't panic. They revisit the strategy again using a repeatable dialogue, which we're going to talk about today to align the next step. And they get results and referrals because their listings get sold because they lead with clarity, they earn trust, and they reset expectations when needed. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room, and that is seller motivation. I don't know if any of you have determined a way to get a seller who is unmotivated to sell their property to actually do the things they need to do to sell the property. But I believe that all of the decisions sellers and buyers make are always based upon their individual motivation. And if you think about it, if a seller is unmotivated to sell their house, it really doesn't matter what you do, they're probably not going to follow your instructions because it's not that big of a deal if it doesn't close. When a buyer makes an offer on a property, and so many buyers in today's market are making these lower offers, and sometimes they just get absolutely rejected, and the buyer gets offended that the seller is not negotiating with them, and the seller's offended that they got this crappy offer. And in both cases, neither one of them are considering the motivation of the other party. And the reality is, if you make an offer on a property where a seller is appropriately motivated, and let's just say even highly motivated, then you don't have to worry about whether or not you're going to get a counterback, because the seller's level of motivation, the fact that they need to be in Phoenix in 2 months, or they need to move to Virginia in 30 days, or the fact that they've got to get their mother out of this place and into the nursing home, or wherever it is, whatever the motivation is, when they are motivated, things work out. So just remember, you cannot change the seller's motivation. You can change what the seller is experiencing. You can change what they're hearing from you, but their motivation comes from things that are totally outside of that listings. Their life changes, a death in the family, a divorce, getting married, graduating from college, having kids, kids moving out of the house, wanting a vacation home, wanting additional income. There's things in their lives that determine their motivation. And so I started thinking, how do I know what percentage of the sellers out there today are motivated and must sell? And what percentage of those sellers out there kind of look at the sales process as it's optional? I'm on a fishing expedition. Let me see what happens here. And based on everything I can find, and this is from conversations with top producing agents across the US and Canada, from MLS data showing the high withdrawal and expirations, expired listings in certain markets, and stuff that I inferred from the National Association of Realtors annual profile of home buyers and sellers. It seems in a market like today, 65% of the listings, 6%, 65% of the homes listed are listed by sellers who must sell. And 35% of the homes listed, it's optional whether or not the seller sells. And so I think the first thing that we all need to understand is the seller's either motivated or the seller is not motivated. If the seller is not motivated, then you continue to have conversations and you have to wait to a point when the seller is motivated. You can't blame them for not being motivated because they weren't motivated the day they listed the home and they're not any more motivated 3 weeks later. I had a conversation, and this is going back 10 or 12 years with a home seller, and I don't know how many of you can relate to this, but I did not like to talk to this guy, and I'm not really intimidated by very many people, but he was the rudest, the most aggressive person I'd ever had conversations with on the telephone, which means if you can relate to this, the first day I listed the home, he thought I was a genius and everything was going to be fine. And by the time the second day of the listing was over, he thought I could be the dumbest real estate agent in all of the southeastern United States. And I would talk to him every single Monday about what was happening with the market, how many views we had on lines, how many showings, what people were saying, whether those buyers who saw his home went and bought something else or what. I had so many good detailed conversations, and he would not budge. He would not budge. He would not budge. And it was driving me crazy. Fast forward 2 weeks, it's a Saturday afternoon, maybe 4:30-ish. It was around a holiday. I don't remember which one it was. And I get a text from this seller that says, change my price to $489,000 immediately. Now, that might not seem like a big deal, but his home was listed at $589,000 the day before he sent me that text. And I'm thinking, what on earth is happening with this particular seller? Something is happening. And so when I called later that day to confirm, because I needed to send him an email to get his approval to change the price to make sure we had our records right. And when I called, I said, hey, I'm not going to tell you his name, but I need to understand what happened because you went from, hey, I'm not doing this to, hey, I'm going to do it. And it happened really, really fast. And he said, well, my wife and I had a very difficult conversation and I had a choice to make. And the choice was either get this home sold and move to the next location with her or stay here in this house by myself. Now, I don't hope that happens to anybody. And I was disappointed that it even happened to this guy, even though he was very, very aggressive with me. But it is life circumstances that change people's motivations. And sometimes we have to have conversations with them so that we understand their motivation even better. There are 4 reasons that a home might not be selling, and there are only 4. And some of them you could consider they're the same thing, and some of them you have no control over anyway, but it's either price, condition, location, or marketing. Now, the word marketing there is the only word that's in green. All of the other words are in white, and it's because the marketing piece is how you earn the right to have conversations about pricing, condition, and location. And you can't fix location, but you can fix privacy. You can adjust pricing for location. You can do those types of things. But one of the things that I want all of you to remember as you go away from today's webinar is that you, when you start having conversations about changing pricing, you must accept responsibility and figure out ways that you can improve or make the marketing better. And for those of you who are saying, well, I already do everything in the first place, well, it can be little bitty things. And so as we were going through 2008 to 2012 and having lots of struggles getting listings sold, and I'm sure a lot of you on here can relate to that, I looked at it this way. I have to earn the right to have a conversation with somebody about pricing. And the way I earn that right is to make sure that I'm doing what I'm supposed to do before I ask them to change what they are doing. And so my policy was always very simple, is that I would audit the listing, I would audit the marketing. I wouldn't do it with 100 different items like the comprehensive listing audit worksheet that we're going to talk about today, but I would review everything with them, and I would give them the 2 or 3 different things that I would change. For example, if the photos in the family room did not pop, maybe we'd put some red pillows on the couch, take those photos again. It was always very simple stuff. Sometimes we'd cut the shrubs down just a little bit lower so the home looked newer. They had big shrubs at the ends of the home and it dated it, and so we would get rid of those, or we would pressure wash or clean up or paint the front door, or something that we probably should have done before that we did not do. And I would earn the right to ask them to reduce the price, and it was very, very important. But I want to make sure that something is clear. In all cases, it is the price. Now, I'm not saying that that is something that anybody is willing to solve, but if you reduce the price to whatever the market accepted as the appropriate price for that listing, or maybe slightly below it, whatever it is, you would get your home sold 100% of the time. And so it's not about, hey, you just got to reduce the price. It's about, hey, I'm doing all that I'm doing. Let me show you all the results that are happening from what I'm doing. I'm making these few changes, but hey, just so you know, the market could be speaking to us and telling us that the price we've offered your home at is not enticing to a buyer. And this stuff is very, very, very powerful. So I've talked to people, many people over the last 6 months, and they say, it's not the price. I know it's not the price. It's priced correctly. And I want to say to them, I don't even understand how you can say that as a real estate professional. It's not the price. It could be that your price is in line with the comparable properties that sold in the last 6 months. But if a property is not selling, the market is saying to you, we do not accept what you're offering at the price you are offering it, because of the location, because of the condition, because of the marketing, or some combination of those. But it almost always boils down to the price. Carly is a real estate agent in North Carolina, not too far from the Raleigh area. Recently, I talked to her. She had 9 listings and 0 pendings. I don't know if that sounds familiar to anybody on this, but 9 listings and 0 pendings. 2 years ago, she said everything seemed fine. She might have even been talking about 3 years ago or 4 years ago or 5 years ago, but she said 2 years ago, everything's fine. Everything I listed sold quickly and it was easy. She actually confided in me that in some cases, she didn't even have enough time to do all the things that she told sellers she would do for their listings because they sold so quickly. And what she was saying was, I could shortcut my service, not intentionally, but I could shortcut the service and still get the same results. And she said, I think that that sort of lulled me into sleep. Now, I asked her to take her 9 listings and to put them in the which sellers are serious and which sellers are just fishing. And she said, well, 5 of these sellers were serious and 4 of these sellers were fishing. And I said, well, in my opinion, you need to ramp up the level of communication you're having specifically with the 5 sellers who are serious. Because if you think about it, if they're serious and they need to sell and their motivation level is high, at some point we have to have some very rubber meets the road. This is the real deal conversations with people about what they need to do in order to get their home sold. And Carly said to me, I'm spending money on these listings that I do not even have. And I can't tell you how impactful that was to me, because I'd love to say that I can relate to that. I've been fortunate, and so I've always had enough funds available in the business to do the marketing that needed to be done. But I can't even imagine the feeling of I don't have any money and I need to spend money in order to make money, but I don't have the money to spend to make the money. And then I had to have been totally, totally frustrating. And she said to me, hey, I thought I had all the right comps. I looked up the comps. They were all in their neighborhood. They all had basements. They were all the same. They all had two-car garages. They all had about the same amount of square footage finished in the basement. And she said, but what the prior sales don't cover are the changes in buyer behavior and the market dynamics, which have both changed. If you were looking to buy a house today, my guess is that you might actually be a little bit wary of market values. You also might have an inclination to ask for a little bit more of a discount or to come in with an offer that is more aggressive on the low side. And what she said to me was such an important thing. She said, I hadn't really truly helped them see the truth because I did not see the truth. And when you start looking for the truth, you have to look at things a little bit differently. And that's the reason we created the comprehensive listing audit worksheet. Now, those of you who, and let me see if I can pull this up, those of you who, let me pull it right over here. Those of you who haven't seen the comprehensive listing audit worksheet, it is a 10 section, 100 question um, audit that you can use to audit any of your listings that are not selling. I don't even want to pretend that I think all of you will actually go through all of the 100 questions in order to figure out why the listing is not sold. And Carly didn't. Carly chose 12 of the most important questions. You'll learn that in just a little bit. And you have to work through them, but they are in different categories. And the first one is pricing accuracy. You've got 10 questions there, very helpful questions. The next one, and this is really the most important one, it should be number one, but it just didn't make sense for it to be number one, and that is market position awareness. Are the sellers aware of if there are 6 listings they're competing with, one, two, three, four, five, six, where in the 6 listings do they show up? Are they the best value and the best price and the one people are going to buy, or are they the outlier? Are they the worst value at the worst price that the buyers are very rarely going to buy? So I want you to think about this second takeaway. The first takeaway was, hey, it's either price, condition, location, or the marketing that's going on. The second one is if your clients, your seller clients, do not have an awareness of how they rank in the market, it is impossible for them to make the right decisions. Because remember, you're giving them the words to tell them what they need to know, but they are picturing your words based on everything that's already going on in their mind. And remember, their friend Alex and Brenda, they sold their home for $800,000. So ours should be worth $800,000. And had they sold their home, if it was the same as the other home, they would have sold it for $800,000 had they sold it when their friends sold their home. But what's happening in the market today could be based on entirely different information. The next section is marketing exposure. Lots of good questions to make sure you're covering all the bases from a marketing standpoint. The next section is photography, video, and media. Sometimes, and you know this, you just go to a listing in the listing service and those pictures speak to you. You look at those pictures, you get sort of a warm feeling like you're looking at something that you love. And sometimes the marketing is just off. And I'm not saying which group you're in, but I'm saying sometimes the marketing is just off. And this will help you review all the things that you need to. The next section, section 5, is condition and staging. All of these you can get up to 30 points. You can do a whole scoring so you understand whether or not you're being successful from the listing standpoint. The next section is curb appeal and exterior. You know, that's very, very important. Then we go into showing activity and buyer feedback. And before any of you post anything in chat saying, hey, you know, buyer feedback's hard to get. There's some lawsuits out there around it. I get it. I get it. I get it. But there's still the ability to get some buyer feedback and some honest feedback, at least for now. And are we doing that? And are we getting what should be considered actionable feedback? So somebody says, I'm getting feedback, and nobody says the price is too high, but they're not making offers. Well, they are telling you that the price is too high, even though they say they think it's priced right. Because when you think about it, if they're not engaged enough in the process to really dig into the numbers to see whether or not it's priced correctly, because they're not interested in what you have to offer for the price it's listed, then who cares what they think about the price? The only people I care what they think about the price are the people who are ready, willing, and able and good prospects for my house. And so when you get feedback, you're looking for actionable feedback. When I say actionable feedback, say it's overpriced, I can't do anything with that. It's overpriced by how much? At what price would your buyer be willing to move forward? 475, 485, 455? What's the number? Because you have to get information that you can give to the seller that they can take action on. I'm not saying they will take action. What I'm saying is you have to get them information that they can take action on. Very, very important. As we move to the next section, seller flexibility. I had a client who had a home listed. Embarrassed, don't repeat this, but the home was listed for almost a year. The reality is the seller was not motivated until the last 45 to 60 days. House was priced at $850,000. The first day I met with her, I told her it was worth $750,000, and I thought that was what it'd be worth all day long. It needed a lot of work, and she needed to sell her house. But every time somebody wanted to come see her house was not a convenient time for her to see it, for them to see it. She had every excuse in the book. And the reality was she wasn't motivated enough to be flexible. But once she got to about 45 days, 60 days before her son graduated from high school, and she knew it was time to leave, then everything changed. Because no matter when a buyer wanted to see it, no matter how often they wanted to see it, no matter whether or not they left the back gate open to the yard or not, she was delighted to have the showings. And in some cases, the sellers don't fully understand how flexible they need to be in a market that is leaning more toward a buyer than it is to a seller. And again, you can't change their motivation, but you can understand and be aware of what their motivation is so that you can understand the decisions they're making. As we look at the last two sections, you have agent engagement and incentives. And you say, well, you can't really offer incentives. Well, you can't offer additional commission in some cases. Well, you could, but they'd have to amend their agreement with the buyer in order to take it. But there's all kinds of ways that you can offer agents incentives. You can offer incentives for people to come into the house. We used to offer Braves tickets for anybody that came into an open house, and we would always have people coming into open house because we're giving away the tickets. So do you have the agent engagement and the incentives right? And the last one is that weekly strategic review. And for me to say that this is one of my shortfalls and that I have really left a lot to be desired over the years, and my weekly strategic reviews would be an understatement. I hate, HATE, all capital letters, to have these weekly phone calls with my sellers. And I'm going to admit something that I don't want any of you to tell anybody else, but in some ways, I feel like I'm too good and too successful over the years to do that. I'm embarrassed to say that because I know that is not true. But I don't want to do what I feel like is sink down to the level to have to cover the things that as a good real estate professional I would. But I'm going to tell you, in today's market, I am not letting a week go by without having those important conversations. And sometimes I will let that week go by, but it is, hey, we're not going to have a conversation today. Let's jump on a Zoom on Thursday and we can talk through all of the specifics. So you've got to keep moving them forward. And then when you look at it, you have a scoring matrix. And I apologize, I've still got a frog in my throat. And if you get from 270 to 300 points, that is an elite listing. At 225 to 269, it is competitive. You should be in good shape. 180 to 224, you're in the middle. And if you think being in the middle is enough, great. If you think you're going to have to be competitive or in the elite status, then you got to make some changes. At 140 to 180 points, the listing's probably stale and your marketing is probably stale. And then below 140, you are at risk, meaning a major overhaul is required. So you've got some great, great, great information here in that comprehensive listing audit worksheet. I do want you all to understand. And Myrna says, can we have a copy of the listing audit worksheet? 100%. Myrna, you, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, you will be able to go to the free download page and you'll be able to get the comprehensive listing audit worksheet in its entirety. My suggestion to you is that you make it simpler, make it easier for you to use. I do have a question from Scott. Can you show screen number 6 again? And I'm sorry, Scott, I don't even remember what screen number 6 is. So if you'll give me some clarification. I will really appreciate that. Sandy says, I spend much more time looking at the actives and pendings and talking about the seller's best position based on their goals than relying on past sold data. And Sandy, that is such good information. Stephanie says, I did my first giveaway and I don't feel like it brought people to an open house. And that's okay. Sometimes things work and sometimes things don't. But what I am saying is generally when you offer some type of incentives, you're increasing your chances of people showing up for the listing. You can do all kinds of things, and there's tons of creative things that you could do that we haven't don't won't have time to talk about today, but that you certainly consider. Let me jump back into the presentation here real quickly. I'm going to share my screen here. So we introduced the comprehensive listing audit worksheet. All of you will get a copy of that. All of you have my permission to tear it up and customize it and make it shorter or make it longer or make it your own. You can certainly do any of those things you want to. And we talked about this before, but remember, it's important for your buyers to be able to rank, for your sellers to rank the property the same way a buyer would. So buyers compare homes like dating profiles. Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. It's fairly simple. And a seller must understand that when that buyer gets a chance to put that house on the list to see, they might get 4 or 5 seconds worth of that buyer's attention before they move on to the next property. You have to make sure that sellers experience all of the other listings so they can self-rank the property. And your job is very simply to make the market very real for the sellers before the home goes live, to make it very, very real. So don't list it until they rank it. So if there are 6 listings that will be their competition, they'll be the 7th. Then my suggestion is that you take the sellers and you let them put their eyes on all 6 of those listings so they understand where they fit into the mix. Now, is it possible for you to take sellers out there to look at other competitive listings and for them not to understand or to still be looking at the situation through rose-colored glasses? Yes, absolutely. But do you increase the chances of them understanding, oh my gosh, we're priced more than the house that has the 2025 kitchen and the 2025 bathrooms and looks absolutely amazing? We're going to have to do something different. And allowing sellers to put their eyes on listings and interior photos, that makes good sense with pendings. It makes good sense with recent sales. It makes good sense with expires or withdrawn listings. But when it comes to active listings, go see them and let them tour them like they are a buyer. So they must see their competition. They must tour and review the listings side by side. And one of the things that you have to help them understand in today's world, because in 2020 and 2021, buyers would forgive almost anything and make offers that were absolutely insane on properties. But today, buyers do not forgive what their eye catches, because their eyes are the gateway to the experience that the buyer has. And we've got to make sure that that experience is a great experience for everybody who tours the homes. And remember that comps are only useful if they are real. When you use fake comps, and not that any of you would use purposefully fake comps, I know you would not do that, but when you use comps that aren't really truly comps for today, or you use comps and don't make adjustments for the market today. Back then, when this one sold, there was 2 months worth of inventory. Today, there's 6 months worth of inventory in our area. So you have to make sure you do some good adjusting for comps. You have to truly reflect reality. Remember a few years ago, it didn't matter if the roof needed to be replaced or the HVAC or the yard was a mess. It didn't matter. Well, it does today. Your pricing must reflect reality, the condition, the roof, the HVAC. How does it smell? Sometimes you walk in a house and I don't know, after 3 or 4 rooms, people are tired of it smelling like dirty feet. All those things are so important. And I know I'm preaching to the choir. Most of you understand all of the things that I'm talking about, but we've got to make sure that the seller understands them as well. And remember that today buyers pay for what is present, not what is possible. Selling houses before the recession, people would come in, they'd buy the house, they'd borrow money on a HELOC, they'd fix up the house, they'd do all of those kind of things. And what I have found over the years recently is that it's very less common for people to do that. Generally, they want to buy the house, they want to move in, they want to start living in the house immediately. And so one of the things that I've done over the last few years is I've tried to get really good at categorizing listings. And so in these particular photos, if you had to guess which one of these homes, and you don't need to put this in chat, but which one of these homes was built in 2025? Just look at the pictures and kind of give it a guess as to which one you think it would be. Now, my next question is, which one of these homes was built in 2012? 2012. And then my third question is, which one of these homes was built in 1992? Because in some cases, we're using 2025 comps for a home that looks more like 2012, or we're using 2025 comps for a home that looks more like 1992. Well, the one on the left is 2025. The two on the right, the one up top is 1992 home. That is a photograph from 1992. And B is a 2012. So properties for me, A looks like 2025. B looks like 2012 and C looks like 1992. And what's so interesting is if you have a B or a C or an A, then you must use comps that are matches for that. So a 2012 must have comps that look like 2012. So you might have to go out and look for listings. You might have to cast a wider net in order to find homes that look like 2012. When I'm pricing listings today, sometimes I will spend up to an hour looking at pictures of the comparables to make sure from the kitchen, from the primary bathroom, from all of the cosmetic and aesthetics that I'm using real life comparables. And if I can't find real life comparables, I have to keep making my circle bigger so that I can find them so that I can understand potential value. Seeing is believing. Sellers have got to review the market like a buyer would review the market. Remember, telling isn't showing. When you tell somebody something, they're thinking my house is nicer, my house is in a better location, mine will blow the others away. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I talk to, and they have absolutely no concept that their home is the worst of all of the homes being offered in that market. They believe buyers will see the same value they do. They believe buyers' perception should be the same as theirs. They will say you as the agent needs to do a better job and I can't sell the property for less than X, which by the way, in some cases is true, but that doesn't have anything to do with the property's value. And when you get somebody out there and you put together the missing link, which is exploring that market together, whether it is online, sitting on your laptop, or even more importantly, getting out and actually putting your eyes on and physically touring the active comparables out there, your design, you give clients that experience, and then they'll say things like, hey, we're not as updated as I thought we were, or our home isn't as desirable as we assumed it would be, or our home won't stand out unless it's priced right, or buyers will rank our home low. And in my opinion, giving somebody a sense of reality to where do I really stack up? Am I number one of the competition or am I number seven of the competition? Because there's a big difference in the price for a number one and a number seven. And any little bitty thing, including the odors of the home, including overgrown shrubs, including the condition of the yard, including the back deck experience or the patio or the sunroom or whatever it is, anything can affect the value of a home. And we haven't had to be very good at actually identifying specifically what the values of the homes were. And we've got to start using buyer behavior as a compass. So we need to track saves and views and showings. We need to let the buyer data guide the adjustments. In other words, how are the buyers reacting and what does that tell us we need to do? And we need to make sure that sellers understand they vote with their thumbs when they swipe. And I know they don't actually swipe that way on the listings, but it's something sellers can relate to. And they swipe with their feet when they come see the house and they don't buy the house. It's because they didn't like the house, not at the price that it's listed. So I want to show you something. I'm going to unshare my screen here for just a second and pull something up for you to take a look at. And it is an email that is being sent out to the seller clients. And this is Tammy Slay. Tammy is my fiance. She is let me get that back over here. There's a different one. Here we go. She is a real estate broker with a small boutique brokerage, easy for me to say, brokerage in North Dallas and Frisco, Texas specifically. And these are the weekly emails that she started sending out to her clients. And so I just want to review it with you. When you go to get the download, this will not be available there for you. But if you go get the downloads within 24 hours, I will make sure that someone at Workman Success Systems actually sends you this as well, because it is absolutely amazing. The first thing she goes into is a little analysis of the market. There are 17 active listings, 8 homes closed in the last month. She gives new news on what's happened with these particular listings. This was listed at this one closed at this, and the seller paid X amount of cost, all of that kind of stuff. Very, very powerful. Reviews how long the home has been on the market, and then gives a comparison of how their listing compares with other listings. You know, the one at Fake Street, 437 views. Ditto Street is 678. The one at Winter Circle, which is theirs, is 1,523 views, 133 saves. Big difference in the 25 and 27. People need to understand that you're doing the things you need to do in order to get the exposure that that home needs. I think it's very, very important. It gives a little comparison of what's happening. In this particular case, the MLS average is 3.7 showings for a listing that would be comparable to theirs in the month of June. All cities, 4.2 showings. That's for the greater DFW area, I'm guessing. And then they're listing 24 showings just in the last 18 days. Now, this is a broker who is building a case for a seller to come to their own conclusion of, you know what, maybe my price is a little high and I need to do something. And then she goes and she gives some summaries. We know that buyers are accepting the property based on their online presentation, but they're not making offers, which means when they come to it, their in-person experience isn't aligning with their expectations. What a powerful way to say what you're offering the market does not meet the expectations of the market. Because when you think about it, that is the problem. She goes on to say, based on the feedback we've received, the carpet is the problem, the kitchen cabinets are creating hesitation. And then look at this, she gives options. And one of the things that's so important is for all of us to remember that it is this option that is the most important one. And that is the option of doing nothing. It is their home. They can make their decisions. They can stay in that home forever if they want to. They don't have to be motivated to sell their home just for you. So don't ever, ever, ever tell somebody, here's your options for making some changes, and not give them the option for doing nothing, because it is that option of doing nothing that makes them feel safe in the fact that they have two other choices. And her suggestions, Tammy's here, was maybe we should reduce the price. She says adjust, not reduce, to 370,000 to take advantage of what's left of the summer market. We'll launch a new campaign there. We can wait to see what happens over the next 2 weeks and revisit the price, or we can do nothing. And then look, she goes on to very strongly recommend, I'm recommending what's behind door number one. Let's adjust that price to 370. Let's be on the offense. Let's be aggressive. Let's do a strategic price drop paired with strong remarketing push that could give you the momentum that you need. This is very, very powerful. I'm guessing that for those of you who are on, that most of you would love to see that. So if you go get the downloads, we'll get it to you. Tracy says, sounds great unless you're in an area of 2,500 people. There is no doubt that smaller markets make things a little bit more difficult, but the same concepts can be applied. And then if you're listing a complete renovation and the home was in 1992, brought up to 2025 standards, is there any adjustment for that property, or do you comp the property to an actual 2025 home? And for me, I would actually comp it to a 2025 home. Now, if it was a 1992 home, it probably has some functional obsolescence that wouldn't be present in a home that was built in 2025. But I certainly would make sure that they're totally aware of the entire situation. Here's what Carly decided to do. She decided she wanted to go with full transparency. She chose honesty over comfort. She picked 12 claw questions and rebuilt her listing process. So she decided she was not going to use the comprehensive listing audit worksheet when things got off track. She was going to use it at the beginning of her listing. And she acknowledges that she knows she's lost some listings that she could have. But the reality is now she has 3, or I think maybe even 4 listings pending, when 2 months ago it was not the case. And she believes that telling tough truths up front is now protecting the long-term trust from her client. She says that preemptive clarity and being proactive, I think she called it proactive clarity, is way greater than reactive adjustment. So she said she's got to not be afraid to rock the boat. She says that she believes if she educates better than anyone, that she will win, and that clarity creates commitment on both sides. So clarity sometimes creates a lack of commitment, but it still puts you and the seller, your seller prospect, on the same page. They don't want to work with you. You don't want to work with them. That's commitment. Or they want to work with you because you've educated them and you want to work with them. That is commitment. Now, for those of you who are saying, hey, this stuff is great and I know I can use it, and every single one of you will use it in a different way. And some of you guys are just so flipping good at real estate that when you just dial in your process a little bit more, you're going to be unstoppable, because there's going to be plenty of business for you to have, even if it's taking it away from the other people who don't know how to handle a listing that won't sell. But this comprehensive listing audit worksheet, or what we call the CLAW, is part of what we call the listing turnaround framework. And the next piece that will be launched in the next 30 days is called the Courageous Conversation Toolkit. What is the psychology of a seller? How do you broach the conversation of making price changes, like word for word? This is going to dig into that in a really, really significant way. I'm going to stop the share for just a second. If you have any questions, I'll spend just a few minutes before I close this up answering any questions you have. If you want to go to chat and post them in there. Let me see if anybody is posting anything here. Let's see. If you have any questions that you want me to answer, just go to chat, pop them in there, and I'll be happy to answer them. I'm going to share the presentation again. There's April has already given you the place to go get the downloads, and I'll give you a QR code here in just a second. Let me get this presentation back up. Again, if you have questions, make sure you go and post those. When you go to the landing page to get the downloads, at the very bottom of the landing page, and this is not for everybody, and if it's not for you, don't worry about it. I don't want you to feel any pressure at all. But at Workman Success Systems, we coach people on the systems they need to use in order to have success in any market. And if you believe there's another level for you, then we could offer you what's called a free strategy session, where we'll do a deep dive into your business. We'll help analyze the things that you need to change, show you the systems that solve those problems. And it's not for everybody, but if it is for you, just click on schedule a a free strategy session. Easy for me to say, and we'll get you signed up. And then here's your free downloads. Just take a picture of the QR code. You will get the top 10 seller myths in today's market. And this is a brilliant little piece, because it allows you to determine what myths the seller is telling themselves and believing, and it gives you the head start for having the conversations that you need. Then we've given you what's called a pre-listing reality checklist. And this is the little simple checklist of here's all the things in the claw that I need to make sure that I am going through with the seller to determine whether or not they have a basis of understanding, or whether or not they are being realistic about the market. And then you'll also get the full comprehensive listing audit worksheet. And don't forget, if you go download the free resources, I'll make sure that you get the sample email that Tammy Slay out of Frisco, Texas is using with all of her seller clients. I can't tell you how much I have appreciated all of you being here today. Myrna, thank you so much. I'm glad you were here, and I'm glad it's helpful. And then Peggy has a question. If the seller is priced high and willing to negotiate for updates, where do we market that, since the NAR rules keep us from mentioning that in the MLS? And I'm not sure that I understand that question. If the seller's priced high, willing to negotiate for updates, where do we put that? I think the reality is, if it comes to, hey, I'm priced at 500, but I'm worth 450, but I would give 30,000 to fix the problem, I think you need to probably focus on adjusting the price. I don't certainly, Peggy, know everything about your question, but I would probably focus on the price, because buyers are going to be hesitant to buy the property and then spend the money on it to do the things they need to do, even if they get it from the seller, because the seller's taking problems that should be theirs and they are switching it over to a buyer, and the buyer is going to say, well, if I'm going to take your $30,000 worth of problems on, you're going to have to give me a $60,000 discount. Thanks to to everybody for showing up today. We're going to do the next section of the listing turnaround framework. We'll do that in the month of August, and you'll receive emails on that. Thanks to all of you for being here today, and good luck as we figure out how to get these listings that are sitting on the market to get them sold. Take care, everybody.